Burlesque by Kamari333. Chapter 29. Not Quite Perfect. Red woke up blearily to find Dance cradled safely in his arms, his soft, rhythmic breathing indicative that he was still fast asleep. Red vaguely remembered Lust leaving, likely going to see his brother. It was Sunday after all. He focused just enough to try and calculate in his head where Lust was in the city, pinpointing him somewhere within the area of a coffee shop on the good side of town. He smirked, pleased with that little bit of info, and settled back down, nuzzling Dance's skull as he closed his sockets again. It actually happened. Red felt that purr rumble messily in his ribcage. He stroked at Dance's skull, dragging his knuckles leisurely over his temporal, occasionally peeking through lidded sockets to gaze upon his new pet's sleeping face. It amazed Red how much stress and irritation just vanished when Dance was so vulnerable. He wondered if it was possible for Dance to make a face like that while awake, to be genuinely content. He supposed it was something to strive for. Red lay there, just enjoying the fact that it was real, that Lust was his, and Dance was also his. He might not have moved at all if his phone hadn't gone off. Red growled, as irritated by the noise as he was by the interruption to his bonding with his pet. His pet. Holy fuck, pinch him, he must still be dreaming. He reached up and grabbed the phone angrily, rolling onto his back and flipping it open. "Someone better be fucking dying," he hissed into the receiver. Dance growled irritably at his side before shifting closer and snuggling into the crook of Red's arm. Red wrapped his arm around him, absently rubbing along the side of his ribs in a fashion he hoped came off as soothing. "Dying of boredom count?" Slim's voice answered over the phone. "Morning, asshole." "Morning, jackass," Red grumbled back in greeting. "The fuck you want?" "It's Sunday. Your pet's busy. Come hang with us." Red looked down at Dance, who was starting to wake up, blinking at the dim light, his hands clutching at Red's shirt. He was scowling already, staring up at Red with a cold intensity that sent a shiver down Red's spine. He had no idea what the right answer was. Was he supposed to run for it, give Dance space? Or did Dance want to spend time with him today even though they never had before? Red pulled the phone from his head. Did you have, plans or some shit?" he asked, feeling like a fucking idiot because he should know what the hell Dance did on Sundays by now. Dance glared up at him. "We literally just started dating yesterday. What do you think?" "I don't know." Dance took a deep breath, closing his sockets. "I was hoping we could, spend some time together and sort our shit out." Red was honestly ecstatic to hear that. He wasn't in the mood to part from his new pet quite yet. Just like with Lust, he wanted to stay close, to bask in this victory, this stroke of luck. He didn't want to go anywhere. Putting the phone back to his skull, Red hummed, "Nah, got other plans. Gonna hang with my pet today." "You're such a buzzkill," Slim whined. "You never want to chill anymore." "Totally chillin' right now. Just not interested in watching you in the ashtray swap smoke all day." Slim hummed, "You could bring your pet along. I mean, he looked pretty down for some Netflix and chill." "Considering the last time? Nah, gonna wait a bit more on that. Maybe some other time." "You're no fun." "Bite me." "Come over and I will." "Nah." Red hung up, putting the phone back on the shelf. His hand bumped against the box, and he had to pause to run his fingers along the outside before bringing his hand back down and relaxing again. Dance grabbed at his hand as it settled on Red's ribs. Red went absolutely still so as not to startle his pet, shoving down the nervous whimper that threatened to escape through his teeth. He needed to get his own shit together, that was certain. Red couldn't function if every new thing Dance did made him panic that he had done something wrong, even if that was the most likely conclusion because Red was an absolute fuck-up. Dance seemed to stiffen at his side before his eyelids unfocused again for a moment and he tightened his grip. "Chill, bonehead." "I'm the most fucking chill, fuck you," Red growled defensively, causing Dance to snort out a laugh. "That an invitation?" Red snapped his teeth shut hard, feeling the heat rise to his face. Dance grinned smugly up at him, pulling Red's hand closer. Red moved it on his own, slow and easy, matching Dance's pace, letting Dance guide the movement as he pleased. Dance gave a more insistent tug, and Red rolled on his side, hoping that was what he wanted. He must have guessed right, because Dance hummed softly, focusing again on Red's hand. He seemed to stare at his palm for a moment before he put his thumb against Red's metacarpals and started to rub gentle circles into them. Red waited for it, for the moment Dance would feel that reminder of Red's stupid LV and freak himself out, but it didn't come. It never came. Red let out a breath he was holding, sagging into his side of the bed. As long as Dance was okay, it was fine. Dance could honestly do whatever he wanted. Who was Red to complain? It kind of felt nice, anyway. Dance's face dusted over with a pleasant shade of pastel blue as he worked, investigating the spaces between Red's claws and metacarpals. He eventually got bored playing with Red's hand and sat up. "Hungry," he muttered to himself, avoiding looking Red in the face. Red pushed himself up. "Let me get breakfast," he said, desperate for something concrete he could do to make it clear he'd be able to take care of his pet. He slipped his phone and the box into his pocket, then made a beeline for the kitchen, already planning the perfect late-morning breakfast for his new pet. Who knew it was even possible to be this happy? Everything should have been perfect. It hadn't even been 24 hours and Dance had Red wrapped around his finger. What had once been a combative relationship transformed literally overnight into one of mutual benefit. Dance only had to make the vaguest of mentions that he wanted something, and Red would bend over backwards to make it happen. It was actually kind of adorable how much Red cared. Red's cooking was amazing. That first breakfast was the most fantastic omelet Dance had ever had, perfectly seasoned to taste the best with ketchup. Red did the dishes. Red let him pick the movies they watched as they both vegged out on the couch, and by God, Red was the most comfortable bag of bones Dance had ever had the pleasure of laying on. Red had a habit of wrapping his hand around Dance's neck, which was a bit odd, but Dance didn't mind, a fact which was also odd. The way Red would scratch at his neck and jaw was soothing. Everything was perfect, except for that fucking collar, god damn it. Dance and Red hadn't even been in a relationship for one day, and Dance already hated that ratty thing with every fiber of his being. It mocked him. It was still mocking him. Every fucking time, Dance tried to make a move, be it leaning up to try and kiss Red, or nuzzle into his shoulder, or touch anywhere within a few inches of Red's neck, the hateful contraption would spark and bite viciously, warding Dance away from his advances. He absolutely loathed it. Was it too soon to ask to get rid of it? Probably. If the way Boss and Lust went on about it, it was probably way too soon. Red, the moron, seemed utterly oblivious to Dance's plight, although even the slightest sign of discontent from Dance would send him spiraling into hysteria. Not that Dance would have known from looking at him, the bastard had the most amazing poker face. It was only Dance's broken soul that let him know there was anything wrong at all. Dance spent as much time reassuring Red that he hadn't done anything wrong, as he did resenting that stupid collar. The day wasn't all bad. After another futile attempt to really get closer, an attempt that caused a particularly painful bite from the collar, Red got up and pulled his coat off the coat rack. He draped it over Dance, and Dance felt his rattling bones start to settle with the comforting weight. He pulled the coat tight around him, leaning into Red's side with a frustrated huff. He didn't get it. Red was supposed to be his date mate too, right? How was he supposed to show him how he felt if he couldn't get closer than arm's length? Then Red had reached in and did that thing where he scratched under Dance's jaw, and Dance let himself drift. He was warm, he was comfortable, and at least one of his boyfriends was there. Being pissed off and teetering on the edge of a panic attack was exhausting. Lust came home, panting softly, his breath visible in the comparatively colder air of the apartment. Just stepping into the living room was like the difference between Hotland and Alphys's old lab underground. He whimpered softly with relief, kicking off his boots. The sight he was greeted with was one he had only ever dared to dream of. Red and Dance curled up on the couch together, fast asleep. Red was sitting with his knees spread, lazy and comfortable, his head tilted back to rest on the back of the couch, a bit of drool dripping down his chin. Dance was pressed into his side, in the same spot Lust usually had, swamped in Red's leather coat and breathing softly, held there by an arm wrapped around his shoulders, Red's claws occasionally twitching where it hung limp. Lust only paused long enough to take another picture, then immediately joined the cuddle pile. Lust snuggled into Red's lap sideways, leaning over to first press a soft kiss to Dance's skull. He had to push away the hood of Red's coat to get to him, and dear God, was this the best thing to come home to. His favorite boys curled up together, relaxed and comfortable and ready for him to join in. Or was Lust actually getting in the way? Should he go? Maybe it wasn't the best idea to climb on the couch with them. Maybe they wanted to be left alone. Lust's thoughts were cut off as Dance's arms snaked out, gripping Lust by his collar and pulling him over for a proper kiss, possessive and hungry. Lust made an embarrassing, but happy, very happy, noise, wrapping his arms around Dance's neck to steady himself, enjoying the attention from the monster who loved him. He loved him. He loved him. Lust hadn't been able to stop the way his whole being lit up at the thought. How happy it made him. Hadn't been able to really stop thinking about it or talking about it all day. Didn't care about that gentle, indulgent smile his brother wore as he babbled about the same topic for hours on end, or the weird looks they got from other tables. He had been too caught up in the fact that someone loved him, and he loved them in return, and it wasn't just about the sex, even though that was great too. And did he mention his date mates were dating each other now? It was a Polly. He was the happiest monster in the world, and now he was home, and he could cuddle them both at once, and there wasn't going to be any more sad. Dance growled, pulling from the kiss to bury his face in Lust's shoulder, a gesture he always made when he was less than happy with a certain situation. Red made a soft noise, a cross between a growl and a yawn. Dance stiffened against Lust, his face turning a bright blue. "Welcome home, sweetheart," Red murmured, his one hand alighting on Lust's leg still in his lap. Lust shifted, reaching out to grip onto Red's collar for leverage to pull himself up. The collar surged and bit at him, but Lust didn't pay it any mind. Red, ever the helpful one, wrapped an arm around Lust and pulled him more fully into Red's lap, letting Lust tug him into a proper kiss of his own. Red smirked into it, his eyelight going fuzzy at the edges. Dance's expression, when Lust again turned to pay attention to him, was one of vicious jealousy and bitterness, eyelids dark and brows turned down, jaw clenched tight. Lust clutched tighter to the collar, willing himself not to flinch, not to show how much it hurt to see Dance look at him like that. He must not have done a very good job, because Dance's eyelids flickered back into his sockets, small and sharp. He reached out, hugging Lust and hiding in his shoulder again, and Lust knew that he hadn't been directing those feelings at him. He looked back up at Red, whose socket had gone darker, his usual large, bright eyelight shrunken and dim, with barely concealed disquiet. The collar in Lust's hand continued to pulse, sharp, cold jolts of aggressive magic slicing through his fingers, demanding he retreat, and it hit him. Dance couldn't just ignore that. Dance couldn't just grab hold and keep on going like the collar was some inconvenient fly. Most monsters couldn't, probably. Lust was just the right combination of persistent and durable. Lust let go of the collar with a soft groan of his own, leaning back into Dance and nuzzling. He should have known that the collar would be an issue. He had just assumed that since Dance hadn't ever had a problem with Lust's collar, why didn't Dance have a problem with Lust's collar? A question for another time. Especially since Dance's hand had snuck down to grip at Lust's spine, stoking the heat that Red's presence and both of their affections had only just begun to quell. Lust whined, arching into his touch, his soul throbbing excitedly inside him.
Dance, not on the couch, please.
Even to his own metaphorical ears, Lust didn't sound particularly convincing or certain of his stance on the matter. Okay, bedroom. Dance's fingertips teased at the discs between two of Lust's vertebrae. Lust squirmed, fighting the insistent pressure in his pelvis, demanding he manifest, right there in Red's lap.
God, yes, please.
Dance always seemed to know when Lust needed it, even when Lust was able to ignore it. Dance never let him forget to take care of himself, even when he would have preferred to. Lust loved him for it, among other things. God, how was he so good with his hands? Lust definitely had not taught him that. Red scratched lightly at Lust's jaw, an affectionate gesture that foiled against Dance's less than innocent ones beautifully. His smile fond, and eyelight softened to that muted red-brown. Feel better, sweetheart. I'll start dinner. Know that shit takes it out of ya. Lust leaned into his hand, the cold soothing against his face. A part of him wanted to ask, wanted to beg they both help him at once, but Lust knew that wouldn't be fair. Dance and Red deserved to have their first time together to figure things out on their own. He could wait. He could wait. He just couldn't wait much more for a little help right now. Lust slid off the couch, darting into the bedroom, knowing, hoping, Dance would follow. As soon as he was inside, he didn't waste any time stripping his already stifling clothes. He heard the door creak open slightly behind him, then shut with a click, and the moment Lust was free of his clothing, save the collar and his socks, Dance grabbed him from behind, groping roughly at his ribs and pubis. Lust gasped at the welcome touch, letting his sockets drift shut as he relaxed in his boyfriend's hold, confident that he was in good hands. He'd been right all those months ago. Dance had gotten so much better with practice. Color? Dance asked, a habit he'd made since they set up their system. Lust shivered just from the question alone, knowing it came because Dance took his role seriously, and cared about him, and loved him. He loved him. This man loved him. Oh God, yes.
Orange.
Lust breathed, grinding into Dance's hand. His magic sparked and sloshed against his bones, just waiting for permission to take shape. Dance rubbed at Lust's pubic symphysis, his other hand sliding up into Lust's ribcage, turning the heavy concentration of his magic there, dragging his fingers along his thoracic vertebrae from the inside. Lust's hands itched to touch, to rub, to do something. But one of Dance's rules was that he wasn't allowed to touch himself without permission. A good rule, if Lust were honest with himself. He only ever made himself feel worse in the long run, without someone to soothe the heat. Hands and knees, on the bed, he commanded, low and uncompromising in Lust's acoustic meatus. Lust shivered, nodding in understanding. As soon as Dance let go, he threw himself onto the mattress, getting into position facing the headboard. He heard Dance shed his pants and take point behind him, between his legs. Dance's hands kneaded at Lust's ilium, teasing the agitated magic that had gathered around his pelvis, heavy and hot. Lust bit back a moan, clutching at the sheets and willing himself to behave. He knew Dance would take care of him, was taking care of him. He just needed to be patient. Dance worked gently at first, soft, affectionate, reverent strokes, his fingers leaving trails of fire over Lust's bones. Lust's mind went blank, his only thoughts how good it felt to be touched by someone who loved him. Nothing was going to ruin that for him. He didn't know how long he knelt there, shaking and panting, his magic burning him from the inside out, his whole world narrowed down to the simmering intent in Dance's hands. Then Dance made his move. He gripped Lust's collar from behind, yanking back with just the right amount of force, rough enough to make Lust really feel it, but not so rough it did real damage, forcing Lust to shift up into a bipedal position on his knees, without his hands. Lust instinctively clutched at his collar, back arching as he wreathed there, body on full display and at his date-mate's mercy. His master's mercy. And Lust loved it. Dance's other hand ghosted over Lust's sternum, the tender touch contrasting with the rough treatment deliciously. "Summon your magic," Dance ordered, his master ordered. Lust complied immediately, his magic solidifying into false flesh around his bones, taking shape into an ass, a midriff, and his aching sex. Dance pulled back a little harder on the collar, sending a tantalizing spark of Red's magic over them both, before taking Lust into a fierce kiss. Lust muled into his mouth, tasting nature, tasting petrichor and ocean winds, with the lingering aftertaste of ketchup. Dance never tasted quite the same way twice in a row, ever changing like time, like the ocean. But he was refreshing and soothing, and Lust wouldn't have him any other way. Dance's hand trailed down Lust's sternum, down until he was teasing at Lust's midriff, alternating between kneading into the soft pseudo-flesh, making little circular motions, and tracing lightly with just the tips of his distal phalanges as he worked his way lower. Lust could feel the cool, smooth texture of Red's coat sleeve slide against him as well, as Dance hadn't bothered to take the coat off. Slowly, achingly slowly, sometimes pulling up again just to drag the moment out a little bit longer. Lust squirmed and whined, begging wordlessly, selfish and impatient as his magic boiled and surged through his marrow. Finally, Dance's hand slipped low and grasped Lust in gorge length, starting up a steady rhythm. Lust felt himself sag, all energy seeming to drain away in the face of such catharsis, such pleasure. Dance broke the kiss, face flushed and panting almost as hard as Lust was, his eyelights bright. For a moment it looked like Dance wanted to say something, but Lust couldn't wait any more.
"I love you too,"
he confessed, quick and desperate, like the human said ripping off a Band-Aid was like. He wouldn't know, he only has skin when it's convenient. Dance's grip on Lust tightened to painful levels, which did nothing except heighten Lust's pleasurable experience, damn his masochistic streak. Then Dance shoved him down, letting go of his dick and rolling Lust onto his back. Lust whined at the loss of contact, only to sob with relief as Dance stole another kiss, somehow more passionate, more loving than the last. Lust threw his arms around Dance's neck, clawing at his back, clutching desperately to the leather of Red's coat. Dance busied himself finding and then stretching Lust's entrance, his fingers practiced and talented, but more desperate and rushed than usual. Lust wrapped his legs around Dance's waist, trying to pull him closer, pleading with every atom in his body, every breathless whimper, every twitch and quiver of his desperate magic. It wasn't soon enough when Dance finally thrust his own length inside him, filling him more completely than fingers ever could. The tingling spark, the electric coil, the energy and pressure that thrummed up and down his spine from the friction between their two magics, brought him near to tears. The fact it was someone that loved him brought him the rest of the way, moisture beading on the rims of his sockets. Dance only gave him the time it took to adjust to his intrusion before pounding into him with wild abandon, rolling his hips with the strength, speed, and precision of a true artist. Lust lost every ounce of self-control he had, coming hard with a cry that might have sounded like Dance's name if Lust had been in any position to articulate coherently. He felt Dance dragged along over that edge, pulled down by Lust's clenching and contractions and maybe the way he screamed. Lust wasn't unaware that his boyfriend had a sound kink. They both stiffened against each other, Dance pressing his face into Lust's neck, clutching to his clavicle with one hand as he braced himself on the mattress with the other. As Lust caught his breath, something he didn't need but that he also completely needed, because if he was breathing he was also alive and awake, and this happiness was real. Dance loomed over him, clicking his tongue in mock disapproval. "Babe, how many times I gotta tell you to ask permission before you finish?" Lust shivered at his date-mate's, his master's, tone, his smoldering gaze.
"I'm sorry."
"I know you're not sorry." Dance cut him off, and he was right. Lust wasn't the least bit sorry. He was selfish like that, because he knew what happened when he broke the rules, and maybe he wanted it to happen, his disgusting, irredeemable soul quivering in anticipation. "But I'm a patient guy. Just means you need another lesson, doesn't it?" And given the look on Dance's face, how just the idea of another lesson seemed to ease the tension in his body, quell some of his frustration, Lust thought maybe Dance needed it too. How did Lust get so lucky to find a partner who meshed with him so well? To find two. Lust nodded dumbly, reaching up to tangle his fingers in the fabric of his lover's shirt, under the coat, tugging weakly. He might have hammed it up a bit, knowing that his helpless act spurred his partner on, until Dance leaned down enough to kiss him again, an ingenuous attempt at making amends. Dance accepted the offer, and Lust could feel Dance's length twitch and throb inside him, pleased. Lust knew, hoped, it wouldn't absolve him of his crimes. Any fear to the contrary was dispelled when Dance pulled away, easing himself out of Lust, and scooting back enough to give Lust room to maneuver. "Now go get the whip." Lust scrambled off the bed, sinking to the floor as his legs gave out under him briefly, before gathering himself enough to dart to the chest by the closet, throwing it open and pulling out his favorite punishment. "Color?" Dance asked as Lust handed it to him, twisting the leather, bending it to make sure it hadn't gone stiff since its last use. He stood up himself, circling around to get behind Lust.
"Orange."
Lust knew the drill. He stood in front of Dance, facing away, and put his hands on the bed, bending forward with his legs spread apart. Dance was so good to him. This time, Lust asked politely before he came. Red had rather good hearing. The walls of the apartment weren't particularly thick. He had a pretty good idea of exactly what was going on in the bedroom. He might have gotten distracted a few times and nearly cut a finger off while chopping the vegetables. He might have needed to stick his head in the freezer for a few moments because it was getting a little too hot in there. The stove wasn't even on yet. What the hell? Red couldn't even tell what was affecting him harder, Lust's breathy, desperate, mewling cries, or Dance's low, muffled, commanding cadences. Or maybe it was how Dance was most certainly holding on to Lust's collar, and there was absolutely no misinterpreting his intentions. It wasn't the first time. Dance had a nasty habit of it, actually, but Red hadn't ever been right in the next room before. It didn't help that Dance had neglected to return his coat before going in there. Was he still wearing it now? Red made a return trip to the freezer, pretending that he didn't see the crimson light from his face glittering on the ice that clung to the inner wall. What he wouldn't give for a bottle of scotch, or some bourbon, or even that cheap piss beer that Boss had a taste for. Anything, literally anything, to distract him from the noises in the other room. He almost regretted not joining the guys for a smoke. Almost. Just spending a day with Dance where his mercurial nature didn't drive the both of them into a fight had been worth a lot more than he expected. Dance was insightful and had fantastic taste in movies. He fit quite nicely under Red's arm, too. Red went back to cooking again, deciding he needed to finally invest in some goddamn headphones. The good noise-canceling kind. If this was going to be a regular thing, then he would need them in order not to dust himself. It took Red a lot longer than it usually would have to throw together dinner. By the time Lust and Dance stumbled out into the living room, freshly showered and in a new change of clothes, although Dance was still wearing Red's coat, the food was cool enough that Red thought it best to reheat. They sat together on the couch, and Red didn't think about what his coat had just borne witness to. He didn't think about the fact that some of the sweat in the inner lining was from Dance, that his coat would likely smell faintly of the ocean. He didn't think about how Dance kept side-eyeing him over Lust's shoulder, or the dreamy, blissed-out expression on Lust's face as he ate mechanically and then proceeded to snuggle between them. He just thought about the weight in his pocket of the box and the little project secured safely inside. He thought about how good it felt to have both of his pets safe and fed and content. He thought about how badly he needed a drink. The next week crawled by. The more time that passed, the more he despised the collar that sat around Red's throat. Nothing he tried seemed to work. He just couldn't get close to it. Friday night, Red had gone a series of text messages. Given the look on his face, and the strange combination of fondness and annoyance that each text ushered, Dance could only assume it was Red's friends that Dance did not like. Red was blowing them off, Dance could tell, but Lust, sweet, caring, forgiving Lust, asked what it was about. Red told them that his friends wanted him to join them Saturday for some fun at the beach, and Lust wanted to go. Dance wasn't about to be the one to tell him no. So there he was on Saturday, packing a small duffel to go on a beach date with his date mates that he knew was going to suck because a couple of assholes were also invited. Dance wasn't in the best mood about the whole thing.
Sans,
Papyrus called from somewhere else in the apartment.
do you have a moment?
Dance zipped his duffel, slinging it over his shoulder, and slinking into the living room. Yeah, I'm about to go out, but...
Oh, wonderful. So am I. Hence my request. I lent my car to Undyne last night, and she has yet to return it. Would you mind terribly giving me a lift with your space-time japery? My plans were to drive, and I do not mind walking, but I will be late getting there if I do so.
Papyrus didn't look it, but Dance could feel he was sincerely apologetic about even asking. He knew how much his brother hated being late going anywhere.
I should be able to walk home afterwards, so you do not have to worry about a return trip.
Dance chuckled. Nah, I don't mind. He held his hand out. Where are you headed?
The beach.
Fuck.
Language.
Papyrus took hold of Dance's hand. Dance took a deep breath, quickly texting Lust that he would meet the two of them there, apparently. Bro? Dance hummed as he pulled them both through a shortcut. I was gonna hang at the beach with
your slime exchanging date mates?
Cut it out with the slime quips.
Cut it out with the slime swapping.
Ugh, yeah, with them, at the beach, so you don't mind, not playing third, fourth, unnecessary wheel, do ya? Papyrus snorted.
I will be too busy trying to salvage my own bad date to have time to meddle in yours. But if I come over saying brother a lot and hint strongly that you are sick and need medical attention, no, this is not another attempt to get you to see Dr. Alphys, but a clever jape on my part to excuse myself from the rest of the evening.
So I'm your emergency out plan? Got it. Dance shifted the duffel a bit on his shoulder, walking with his brother out of the shadow of an alley and out towards the sunny beach, looming disparagingly crowded. Another reason he hadn't wanted to come. The emotional noise was already giving him a headache. Who is this date with, anyway? Not the human again, is it?
Of course not. We are completely platonic. No, I met this unseemly fellow at the discotheque.
Dance club?
Discotheque. Last week. Friday. The day before I met your date mates. I was having quite a lot of fun, letting loose, enjoying an orange juice because I am not an alcoholic.
Pyrus.
Sorry, I know you have been doing better.
Oh my god.
And these two smelly fellows start trying to dance on the table. I believe they were incredibly inebriated, and I turn and try to give them a few pointers, but then again, they are quite sloshed.
Bro.
Blotto.
Dance just started snickering by this point.
Utterly bacchic.
Dance's laughter became full-blown cackling, and he had to hug himself to keep his bones from rattling off in all directions, or so it felt like. Papyrus beamed, proud of himself for making his brother laugh.
So I go over to offer my assistance to try and improve their bibulous bumbling, but they ignore my attempts to get their attention. And then this third fellow whom I can only assume is their keeper, as he is the only one of the three not sickeningly squiffy.
Squiffy.
Tiddly. Snockered.
Dance knew he looked like an idiot, but there was something unfairly hilarious about his brother's seemingly endless euphemisms for drunk, and he could not stop laughing. Half-sea's over?
Keep your awful puns out of my story.
Papyrus continued to navigate the crowds, sometimes weaving around the many patrons, sometimes parting the crowd with his sheer presence, leading Dance with a hand on his shoulder.
But yes, so this fellow is the only one of the group at his table not overly freakishly fuddled, and he tells me, while stone-cold sober, to...
And it is at this point that Papyrus pitched his voice just that little bit higher, emphasizing the accuracy of his recitation.
Go recruit for your circus elsewhere. These clowns are mine. And I am not certain if the insult was to myself or his companions, but that was not the most unusual part. The unusual part was that this fellow was completely empty. He was not having fun at all, or the opposite of fun, for that matter. It was quite unusual, and so I told him. I said, if I were recruiting for a circus, I would be offering the job of terrifying animal, not clown. Clowns are funny, and have grace and manners.
You did not.
I did.
Bro.
And then he gave me a look, and I almost thought I felt anger from him, but then it was gone. His crocked companions thought I was witty, though, although in hindsight it is no great feat to make drunkards laugh.
Papyrus found an empty patch of sand, not too far from the water, but also not too close. Dance took the hint and sat down, pulling out his towel as he kept listening.
And then the fellow said, "You have some nerve talking to me like that." And I said, "I do not have any nerves, I am a skeleton." And then one of the sozzled fellows went, "He's got you there, bro." And the sober fellow glared at him like he did something wrong, but the plastered fellow only snickered. And then the sober fellow said, "Go bother someone else with your idiocy. As you can see, I have enough nonsense to deal with." And the other tipsy fellow said, "You wouldn't have to deal with us if you would just loosen up and have fun." And the other drunkard said, "But my bro doesn't know how to have fun." And then the sober fellow snapped, "Yes, I very well do know how to have fun."
Why do I get the feeling you poked the bear? Dance asked, laying back on his towel.
Shush you. Where was I? Oh, yes. And then I said, I very much doubt it, given that having fun implies you enjoy something, and you are incapable of enjoying anything. Because, you see, he could not feel anything, and so, of course, could not enjoy things. and apparently hearing the truth makes this fellow rather angry, which in turn proved me wrong, which of course also proved me right, because I am a firm believer that anyone can do better if they try. But I digress. He snapped at me. He said, "I'll show you, incapable," and then grabbed my arm rather harshly and dragged me back to the dance floor and...
Dance was certain he felt a flicker of something close to delight at the memory his brother had fumbled over.
Well, I am not too proud to admit he was rather talented at ballroom.
So you asked him out?
Of course not. Then he stomped back to his brother and his friend, who had started canoodling with each other, and he said, "Quit embarrassing yourself." And then one of the soused fellows said, "You only think that because you cannot get a date." And then the sober fellow said, "I can damn well get a date, you insufferable booze hound." And then I said, "Language."
Dance cackled.
And then he turned to me and went, "You, me, next week, 12 o'clock, the beach. Be there." And I, never one to turn down a chance to perform charity, graciously agreed.
Dance's brother was a pretentious, prideful bastard, and Dance loved him. He was the coolest, even if he did drive Dance absolutely up the wall sometimes. Bro, it's like 11 now. Your date isn't until noon. Why?
Because it is a beach date, so of course I must arrive early to secure a suitable location.
Dance then felt the brush of a familiar, caring warmth against his soul, the sensation of a profound love that he had come to associate with his date mate. Lust was nearby now. Dance quickly pulled out his phone, texting him that he had a spot near the water. Lust texted back that they were on their way with Red's friends. Dance scowled at the reminder of those two. He trusted Red to keep Lust safe from them, and wasn't that a stark change from a few months ago, Dance trusting Red? But that didn't mean he liked the idea of that smarmy bastard in the orange hoodie being anywhere near his boyfriend. A small part of him didn't trust them near Red either, not after the bits of conversation he'd overheard from phone calls. But this was happening, because Dance didn't have a reason to say no other than his egregiously misplaced jealousy. So he would suck it up and keep an eye on them. And if anyone even looks at his boyfriends wrong, they were gonna have a bad time.
Hey guys, Mel here. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed it, please like this video, and if you want to see more, consider subscribing. I look forward to bringing you the next chapter. Bye!